Hey everyone, this video is brought to you in part by the US Rugby Foundation. Go to usrugbyfoundation.org to find out all the things that the US Rugby Foundation does to support grassroots rugby. And you can donate, or you can just find out what they do and perhaps get a scholarship, get some other support that your program, your club needs. So go to usrugbyfoundation.org. It's also brought to you by Next Phase Rugby, and Next Phase Rugby is a great way for high school rugby players, boys and girls, to connect with college rugby programs, men and women. You can be seen, you can upload videos, you can tell them about your test scores and your grades and your interests, and so you can find the right college for you so you can get a great education, play some rugby at a great program. And if you are a college coach, you can sign up and find players and student athletes that you would never have found before. Go to nextphaserugby.com, download the app, and get started. All right, so it's interesting that we're partially brought to you by Next Phase Rugby because we're talking about college rugby, and really we're talking about varsity college rugby, and something that sort of comes up, and it really, we think of it as an experiment. A lot of new varsity programs have sprung up over the years, especially in the men's game. And what happens in the men's game is that the teams decide to go in a lower bracket in a lower division. They want to get their feet under them. They're not sure what they have. They're mostly freshmen, things like that. So they want to just sort of dip their toe into the water, so to speak. And the thing is that there's a difference between getting your feet under you and going 7-0 in your conference and getting your feet under you and you go like 3-3 or 4-3. I mean, that's a 500 season, your first season. That's pretty good. We're seeing an awful lot of teams, or it seems like it, an awful lot of varsity teams do very well in lower divisions where the rest of the programs competing there don't really think of themselves as varsity or really a place where varsity programs should be competing. It's a club competition, so they get annoyed. So I wanted to look at that and maybe talk about it a little bit. And first off, let's have a look at who's left on the playoff levels in the lower divisions. This is mostly NCR stuff, but we will be talking about some other competitions as well. So if we look at the varsity or near varsity programs that are in the final stages of the championships this fall, in the lower brackets, we see that, say, in small college, for the men, we've got Christendom, which is, they've been around a few years, but they're getting a lot more support. New Mexico Tech, which is a bit of an up-and-comer. We wrote about them, talked to them in the spring, and they're sort of an up-and-comer. And Wayne State, which has been around a while as a varsity or quasi-varsity program. They're in actually the Challenge Cup for small college. The other two are in the Cohen Cup, the main competition. So we'll talk about the reasons why they're there and reasons why they might or might not be right for it. Division 2, Adrian, brand new program, starting right now, and they go straight into the semifinals in Division 2. Thomas More, they've been around a little bit longer, but again, a varsity program into the Final Four in Division 2. Norwich, same deal, although they've been around a lot longer. And there's a fourth team, Marion. You see a t-shirt there, they sent me one of those. Marion College didn't make the Final Four. They lost to a club team, Northern Iowa, by 4 points. So almost went 4 for 4 on this. So is this a problem? Well, yes and no. I think that if you look at history, you'll find, and we'll have a list for you, teams that had higher expectations, Division 1AA, Division 1A, and they started in Division 2. And they didn't really move until they started winning championships. And that's not really the point. The point is that if you start your first year in a lower division, you're just trying to get your players together, get your program together. And that does happen, and I think that's effective. I mean, that's shown in the case that, like I said, Marion didn't make this Final Four, right? There are other smaller varsity programs. Rio Grande, brand new, made the playoffs, won their conference, but they didn't make it to the end here. Winning the conference, though, is that too much? Is that too much in a situation where small colleges and Division II really aren't expecting to be a varsity school-supported program? So as we magically change our whiteboard, we have a look now at Division I varsity or non-varsity programs that won lower down. And we're talking mostly about D1A teams here, but not completely. So you look at Lindenwood. They were champions in Division II before they moved up. Division I AA, they made it to the final, lost in the final. Then they moved up to D1A. Notre Dame College, they were third in Division II, moved up to Division I AA. They won a championship there. They actually finished second one year and then moved up and won a major championship. Davenport, Division I AA champions twice before they moved up to D1A. And Queen's University, third in Division II, and then champions in Division II before moving up to what is now in NCR called Division I. And they were bumped up from what they thought was a Division I AA conference up a little higher, and they're now in the Final Four of the major Division I NCR program with, by the way, cuts down a quasi-varsity program in D1A, or that used to be in D1A, St. Bonaventure, which is a varsity program, and Penn State, which is an elevated club at Penn State. So is this unfair? Is this wrong to do this? Well, nobody was stopping them, so in that sense, it wasn't wrong. Did it help them? Certainly helped them move their way up. I think that you could argue that Notre Dame College, spending a couple of years in Division I AA, took a little bit of time to get up there. Davenport, a couple of years in Division I AA. Do they need to win 2 championships? I don't think they did. Queens, spending 2 years in Division II, that seems a bit much. However, just to excuse them a little bit, number one, if you're talking about moving up in D1A, you have to be accepted and you have to have a conference to join. If you can't get a conference to join, you can't accept it. Or, for that matter, your university, while they say, hey, we'll pay for all of this stuff, but we're not going to pay for your travel if you go to D1A, that can be a problem. Queen's University, they were looking for a conference, right? So the other thing that they were running into is that their roster, they just started it. So you start it and you say, wow, okay, we're way better than we thought we were, but we're going to lose a couple of players. This player's going to go here, or, we recruited a couple of transfers and now they graduate. Or, do we really have the staying power? You don't know. So I don't think of them as being underhanded in this way, but I do think that ultimately it does seem like the experiment isn't all that necessary. You don't need to go to Division II in order to provide proof of concept. You could probably go straight into Division I and do just fine. But there are some issues there. It's not just cut and dry. For example, if we go back to our previous list, you remember I mentioned a couple of teams, Thomas More and especially Norwich. Now, Norwich has been a varsity program for a long time, and they've done well in Division II for a long time, although they never won a national championship. Should we kick Norwich out of Division II simply because we now have a hard and fast rule saying no varsity programs in Division II? Well, I don't think so, and I don't think anybody thinks that. Anybody who's complaining about the likes of, say, Adrian and Marion are not complaining about Norwich. They're not complaining about Norwich because it's a small school, for one thing, and it's a military college where if you make that decision to go to Norwich, you're making a major life decision that's over and above and outside of, I just want to go to college and figure out what I'm majoring in, stuff like that. You actually have to say, well, I'm going to go in the military, pretty much. So there's some excuses there. You also look at small colleges and say, are you going to make Christendom move up? Well, Christendom's a pretty small university. What about Susquehanna or some of the schools like that? They're quite small. That's the whole point. They're small. So the fact that they are in a varsity situation is great, okay, for them. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they should be kicked out. But I do think that there are some schools that it's pretty clear if they're just starting out and they have aspirations to move up, that maybe there's something we should do about it. Now, here are 2 things that we could think about, and they are being thought about right now, so it's not just unique to me to come up with these ideas. Number 1 would be no postseason. So you could say to any program, you can come in, you can play in whatever, the Great Midwest in Division II or New England Wide or Cardinals or any of those. You can play. But if you meet certain criteria, you're not the postseason team. Somebody else. That's a possibility. And the other possibility that is possibly being looked at is to have a varsity-only conference. Now, I think it's appropriate here that you see in my backdrop, and if you want something in this backdrop, you should send it to me. Here's the NIRA poster. This is the Women's National Intercollegiate Rugby Association poster from their finals. And thank you to NIRA, by the way, for allowing me to have one of those. That's a specific conference for NCAA-supported women's teams. Now, they might get dispensation to play outside that conference, but this is what they do. And this is their postseason. So could you have that, not with the NCAA moniker, you're never going to get that with the men anyway. Could you have it with varsity programs that we're seeing spring up? And it's not just Adrian, and it's not just Marion, and I mean there's McKendree and Rio Grande and Belmont Abbey and teams like that. Not all of them have blown everybody away. Some of them have struggled, and we're going to see it, but we are seeing a few more come through as well. Latest news: Trident University in Indiana, and maybe it's like the Trine rule, because you look at these teams, and many of them are in the Midwest, and you could quite easily create a conference that is these teams, and maybe you create two, one sort of in the north and one sort of in the south, and then they play each other for some kind of championship. That would be great. I think that would say a lot about collegiate rugby in America. That would also perhaps quiet down some of the complaints about this. But I don't think we will ever see a conference like D1AA, a division like D1AA or Division II completely without varsity programs, because there's always going to be something that's a definition that's a little bit to the side, a little bit different. But I do notice that as NCR moves ahead and as CRAA moves ahead, that they are starting to try and find some definitions. NCR looked at what we thought of as the D1AA competition and the teams that were sort of in D1A or used to be, and they made some other decisions about who goes to what playoff. And so you saw Mary Washington and Queens and Mount St. Mary's considered for a higher level playoff with Kutztown and Penn State and Brown, another varsity program, almost varsity program, that is sort of, kind of, almost, and St. Bonaventure. At the same time, though, NCR is still balancing it. Nazareth, which is a varsity program, was put in the second level, their D1AA. Well, Nazareth is starting out, and they went straight into D1, so that's a little bit of a jump for them. So they skipped past all this Division II stuff, and good for them. And on the other side in CRAA, we see a final in D1AA, which is being hailed as a club final. And it's a club program, Tennessee, against a club program, Bowling Green. And that's true. They are basically the two highest ranked club programs within D1AA, according to Goff Rugby Report. So, many questions to answer, but I think it does need to be addressed. And I don't think there's necessarily a hard and fast rule that if you're varsity or almost varsity, you have a lot of money, that you can't play in small college, you can't play in Division II. But what I do think is that if we explore at least an issue about what kind of program goes against the basic profile of competition, and certainly if we explore the idea that maybe if these teams don't bump up to a higher division right now, maybe they just play amongst themselves. Well, I'm Alex Goff, and I'm editor of Goff Rugby Report, and I really appreciate you watching this video and reading the content and everything like that. You can support what we do. You can go to the link that's at the bottom of the screen or in the description of this video. And also, if you want to have your rugby program in our backdrop, contact us and I'll give you information on how you can send something. We'll take a ball, we'll take a hat, we'll take a hoodie, a little t-shirt, anything that you think might be there just to say hi with your program, well, just make it a little bit more fun. So thanks a lot for watching.